What is up, guys? It is Kitsos from Coasterland, and today we are ranking my top 10 Aero Mine Train coasters. Now, just a disclaimer, all this footage belongs to the parks except for the Roadrunner Express POV, which belongs to James C., and he will be linked down below. So we're just going to jump right in, as I like to do on my list. At number 10, we have Runaway Mine Train. This was actually the first ever mine train, so it does have historical value, but it was clearly a prototype for the model. Why do I say that? Well, it's jerky, it's not really eventful, it doesn't really do much for me. I mean, yeah, it's still a fun family coaster in the sense that, it's not so unbearably jerky that, you can't ride it again ever in your life or anything. It's not like an SLC jerky, but it is definitely showing its age, built back in 1966. Now, it does have 3 lift hills, which definitely makes this a longer ride as a whole. You definitely can notice it as you go. You kind of are like, wow, is this ride ever going to end? Because it doesn't seem to ever end. And believe it or not, it's under 3,000 feet of track. It's just those multiple lift hills and the low top speed really make the ride go by very slowly. As for the jerkiness, it's not unbearable, but it definitely is pretty high up there with the jerkiest arrows I've ever ridden. And because it has no real force, it doesn't really do much for me in that regard. Now, something else to note about these Aero mine trains is they're not usually going to be smooth, but whether or not they're forceful will determine their spot on this list, or if they have a good layout or theming, that also will help them on this list. But yeah, Runaway Mine Train, it's just not good. It's probably the weakest coaster I rode at the park, which is unfortunate considering I rode the Mini Mine Train, which you'll see a bit further along on this list. But yeah, this was, it's just disappointing. Now, I've heard it has a great ejector moment in the back row on this final drop that you're about to see. And if the River King Mine Train, excuse me, I lost my train of thought there. The River Train Mine, you know what I mean. The River King Mine Train. There we go. The River King Mine Train is anything to judge it by, then those drops can have ejector. I kind of regret not riding this in the back row, but we didn't have a lot of time at the park. We had one shortened opening day, so it just wasn't a good time to get re-rides on rides like this. But if I ever go back to the park, which I plan on doing eventually, I will definitely give this one a go in the back row. So you roll back into the station. I will admit the theming before the final drop is really good, so I definitely will give it points for that. That theming is pretty well done. So let's move on to number 9. There's the Six Flags Over Texas logo. And we have Mini Mine Train at number 9. So Mini Mine Train is a weird coaster because you wouldn't expect the kids' mine train to be better than the full-sized one. Yet here we are having this conversation. Yes, I truly and firmly believe that the kids' mine train is so much better. It's smoother. It's honestly more forceful than... It has an airtime moment. It's like a little pop. I'll show you it in a sec when it comes up. But yeah, Mini Mine Train, it's so much better than the adult-sized Runaway Mine Train, in my opinion. I mean, obviously, everyone will have their own preferences. I've heard people say this is better just like I am. I've also heard people say it's not. It's all up to, the person and what they like in a ride. But right here is that little pop of airtime, and yes, there is a little airtime there. Not something you typically find on a kiddie coaster, but you know what? We're having this conversation. So yeah, we also got 2 laps when we went, if I recall correctly. But yeah, Mini Mine Train is a really fun ride. So at the number 8 spot comes probably the ride with the worst layout, although it's pretty smooth and it has some force, so I put it above the last 2. But it's Trailblazer at Hersheypark. This ride just has one of the most uninspired layouts I have ever seen. Like, I know Hershey has the whole excuse of we have to fit it where we can fit it, but if you look around this ride, there was so much land that they could have used to just put extra track, make this longer than, because it's like 1,600 feet long, which is already way too short for a full-size mine train like this. And then if you look at the layout, it's literally a lift hill and a continuously or a continuously going down helix. That's how I wanted to say it. So basically, if you look at this, sorry, I couldn't talk there for a second. Today's another day I can't talk. But look, you basically bank to the right and go into an extended helix right here, and then you kind of meander, then you go into a left-hand turn, then you lose all your momentum with this darn block break, which I think is pointless and shouldn't exist because there's no need to be a mid-course brake run on a mine train like this. Then you rise up and you go down into a double downward helix. Now this is the best moment on the ride though, because this does give some good force, so I guess that's why I put it at number 8, because of its force. But other than that, like, you know, it's not really that great a ride. The layout's clearly uninspired and looks like something you could design in Roller Coaster Tycoon. So, at the number 7 spot, using my own POV, so I guess there was one other credit, it's my POV, this one, is Dahlonega Mine Train at Six Flags Over Georgia. This is very similar in almost every possible aspect to Runaway Mine Train. The only difference, I think, in Dahlonega is I just found the final drop to be more enjoyable. It actually had some really good force, so I don't know. I just found this one to be much more enjoyable than Runaway Mine Train. Now again, I'm sorry, I cannot talk. I've stuttered like 4 times and I couldn't think of the word for like twice. I do apologize. It's a little late at night. Maybe I should stop filming this late. But anyways, yeah, this one has 3 lift hills, much like Runaway Mine Train. It has a similar track length and opened just a few years afterwards. Obviously, Six Flags Over Georgia being the second ever Six Flags park. So, obviously, them getting an Aero Mine Train right after the original Mine Train was such a success is kind of expected. I mean, if you're a business and something works, you stick with it. Now, something I noticed that really disappointed me was there used to be a lot more greenery and stuff around this part of the ride. Right here, as you can look, see how it's just bland and all that? There used to be like a concrete trough that the ride went through, and it kind of gave a better vibe than this. I don't know why they removed it. I mean, I never got to ride it when it had the concrete trough, but I do know that at one time it did, and I really am puzzled why they would remove that at all, because really, I mean, removing what little kind of sort of theming this ride had would probably not be the best move for me if I was running the park. But of course, I'm not running the park, Six Flags is, so, you know, it is what it is. But the ride itself is not bad. This final drop that you'll see coming up is actually really fun, and I found some good lateral force because it does turn slightly as you drop. And overall, this ride is really fun, and it's just not as rough either. That's something I noticed. It is jerky, but it's nowhere near as rough as Runaway Mine Train. So, honestly, better layout, but very similar. And that's about really my only reasoning right there. See, right there, that's the lateral moment. Alright, so let's move on to number 6. And number 6 is Cedar Creek Mine Ride. Now, Cedar Creek Mine Ride may surprise some of you because I have trashed on this ride so much for its boring, uninspired layout and also for its jerkiness. I have trashed on it. I will admit it. I do not like Mine Ride that much. But I cannot deny credit where credit is due, and that credit is due in the setting of this ride. It almost makes up for it being a completely terrible roller coaster. Almost makes up to it to a point where I actually have put it at the number 6 spot, just outside my top 5 mine trains, because I cannot deny that the setting over the water is absolutely stunning. It's one of the best settings for Arrow Mine Train, though not the best. There are 2 higher on this list that definitely have it better, and a third that probably you can make a fair argument for. But, I mean, the setting's just spectacular. It's all this green grass as well. They kept the area very well done. And Cedar Fair doesn't really do as much theming, or at least they didn't back when they were doing this, although Cedar Point was an indie park at the time. But this feels like a mine train. This is what a mine train should feel like. It does the job perfectly. It's an intermediate family coaster, although I do fear Mine Ride's days are numbered. If there is an Arrow that they're definitely going to want to axe, it's going to be either Mine Ride or Gemini. And since Gemini is still pretty popular on certain days anyways, I do think Mine Ride will get the axe, which is unfortunate to see any Arrow go, as obviously we won't be getting any new Arrows, so once they're gone, they are gone. But I'm sure it'll hang on a few more years, because I think Cedar Point recognizes its importance as the park's intermediate family coaster, or one of them anyways, and definitely it's an important coaster in their lineup, but I don't think they'll find it important for too terribly much longer. They could easily replace it with another more modern family coaster that parts are not anywhere near as expensive. So yeah, number 6, Cedar Creek Mine Ride. Also to note, I love the mine trains with the wooden structure. It gives it more of a mine train feel. So that's definitely got it with some points as well. And into the brake run. So starting off our top 5. Oh lord, this is a long video. Starting off our top 5 is Carolina Gold Rusher. Now, Carolina Gold Rusher is one of my childhood favorites. This was, if I recall, one of my first big rides outside of Disney. So outside of Disney, like this and Thunder Road, which may it rest in wooden pieces, Thunder Road that is. This and Thunder Road were the big coasters I went on at Carowinds in my first ever visit, and I remember very vaguely how excited I was for this. I remember a lot more about Thunder Road because it was absolutely terrifying for me to ride something that big. It was the first time I've ridden something that big. But this definitely, I remember it, and it runs like a dream for something that was built in 1973. I mean, it's not that rough at all. It really, it has such a classic feel. It still is a little jerky. I will say that. A couple of the turns could probably be done a little better. But like the little tunnels are such a nice touch for a mine train. It really is a really long ride too. I mean, it's not as long as, say, Runaway Mine Train or Dahlonega, but I mean, it has 2 lift hills, and the track length is actually similar to the other 2 I mentioned, just a few hundred feet different or something like that. But, it runs really well, and it has a great final drop into a tunnel, which at night, by the way, it is like freaking pitch dark almost. Like, it's a really dark tunnel at night. I've only ridden it at night like once or twice, so I haven't ridden that many times. But yeah, this is just a great mine train. Carolina Gold Rusher has a special place in my heart too, so maybe I'm just a little biased towards it. But that's the great thing about opinions. You're allowed to be biased towards something now, aren't you? But yeah, this final drop right here is really good. And then you bank up into the final brake run. So yeah, it's an awesome, awesome mine train. But it gets better from here. At number 4, we have a shocking pick for some. It is River King Mine Train. One word, ejector. Where, you may ask? Back row, final drop. Oh my gosh. That is what makes me regret not riding Runaway Mine Train in the back row, because if it's something like River King's, then I missed out. I really did. But, of course, I didn't want to ride an Arrow in the back row for my first ride. I wanted to give it the best opinion I could possible, and I still thought it was trash, so I didn't re-ride it. But River King, I liked it the first time. I rode it in the front. I was like, this is a good ride. This is pretty solid. I'm going to ride this again because I'm here, and it has no line, and why not? So then I rode it in the back, and I get launched, and I mean launched out of my seat on the final drop. I mean, no, it's not RMC ejector, but I mean, considering I had no concept that that was coming, and then I just got launched, it was pretty surprising, I would say, would be a good way to describe it. Of course, River King has 3 lift hills on it. It actually has a couple minutes of positive force, or moments, I should say. Not really a ton, but really what makes this ride so good to me is that one pop of ejector in the back row. I do think that there are some unnecessary trim brakes, like that one right there that we just went over on this ride. But I mean, it's an Arrow. You put trim brakes wherever you feel like on these things. And also, this third lift hill is probably one of the biggest jokes of my life. It was kind of funny how there's like a 10-foot tall lift hill just to keep the train going. I found that very entertaining because I'm a geek, and sometimes I geek out on coasters and just look at a 10-foot lift hill and just laughed. You know, that's what I did. I laughed. But anyways, right here, this drop, holy crap, ejector. And that's the funny thing. It's not even a big drop. It's like a 30-foot drop. But the triangle profiling and the long trains that Arrow mine trains use, well, you know the drill. I mean, come on. So we're going to move on to number 3. And number 3 is Adventure Express. Now, this is probably, I'd say it's safe to say, the best themed roller coaster at Kings Island. I know that might be controversial because, yeah, you got Mystic Timbers with the shed, but I mean, come on, give me a break. I feel like the actual track is themed a lot better on Adventure Express with these tunnels that are themed to like an adventure and all that. And then, of course, the final lift hill, but we'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, Adventure Express is one of my favorite mine trains, obviously. It's in the top 3. The only reason the next 2 are higher is because of other reasons I will discuss. However, Adventure Express, what really blows me away about this ride is, first of all, I love the pre-lift section. Like, you go through a good third to a half of a ride before the lift. That's a good ride to me. I like those pre-lifts as long as they're good pre-lifts. And let me tell you, this one has a great pre-lift. Then you go up the lift hill, and then you continue on your course, which is loaded with great moments of laterals and a little bit of positives here and there. But if you notice some of these turns, they're banked, but sometimes they're not banked as much as you would think a turn like that would be on an Arrow, and you get some lateral force. There's no real air time on this ride, unfortunately, but that's okay, because it does everything else so well with all the running amongst the trees. It really does feel like an adventure, and it really does the job perfect. Then you hit the brake run and go up the final lift, hoping and praying that there's actually another 1,500 feet of track, only to be disappointed. But hey, at least the theming's great. I mean, you know, good theming. With those, you know, monkeys banging on the drums, and then with the whole Indiana Jones feel, as you can see. If you ride the ride, you'll definitely notice it. Sorry about the bad audio jump if there was. I made a joke and then realized it was probably inappropriate, so I had to cut that out, so I do apologize for that. And no, I will not be telling that joke. Okay, so we're going to move on to number 2. But yeah, I gotta love Adventure Express. It's everything you can want in a mine train, but these next 2 just do it a little bit better. So at number 2, we have Roadrunner Express. This is, of course, an Arrow mine train. That's the whole point of this video. If you haven't figured that out, well, there you go. Now you know. But this is a bit of a unique one. It's the only Arrow mine train designed by the legendary, the one, the only, Alan freaking Schilke. Alan Schilke designed this, and it is a masterpiece. It is probably one of the most forceful rides I've ever had on an Arrow, and it's a freaking mine train. the helixes on this thing, like right here, there's gray out moments on this. There's ejector airtime on this. Like, it's ridiculous. Heck, in the back row, you get airtime coming off the lift, like a tiny bit, off of this second lift. As you can see, it's a bit of a steep drop to the next, to the piece of track following it. So once you get down to this section of the track, in the back row, it'll actually give you a little floater feeling. Then here comes my all-time favorite moment on a mine train, even though this coaster isn't my all-time favorite, for a reason I'll explain. But it's this helix. It's so intense. And the reason this coaster isn't number one is quite simple. It actually sits only one lower in my rankings to the number one spot. The reason is obvious, I think. It's just so short. If this ride was longer, it would be my number one mine train, but unfortunately, it is not. So at number one comes one of the greatest aero coasters I've ever ridden. It is, of course, Thunderation. This is one of the most out-of-control feeling rides I've ever experienced. Constantly picking up speed as you travel down a hill. Like, Aero, why didn't you do this, like, everywhere? Like, build a freaking hill. I don't care. Just do this everywhere. Because this is so good. And maybe Vekoma will do something like this with some of their mine trains in the future in some terrain parks. But, I mean, this ride, it just picks up speed. You go through tunnels. You go through positive G moments. You go through some laterals. And you're just gaining speed. You're just flying. It's insane. And then you enter this tunnel. Right here, you hit the brakes. They slow you down. And then you go into your lift hill. But, unlike Adventure Express, this ride has a little bit more up its sleeve than just this lift hill. It then will go through a final helix, which has some good positive Gs, before ending the ride, as you'll see in a bit. But, as this video comes close to a close, because KindMaster doesn't let me record audio beyond the video clip, I'm going to close out this video in typical Coasterland fashion. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please click that like button down below, and that really does help with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you are not subscribed, please consider doing so, as we would love to have you here in the Coasterland family. Also, for 500 subscribers, whenever I get that, I will be ordering merch shirts and giving them away. So, that's something to look forward to in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed, and again, click that like button to help me out against the algorithm, and until next time, peace guys.